The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of my bedroom, filling the room with golden light. It should have been a day of joy. My daughter, Emma, the little girl I raised with trembling hands and sleepless nights, was getting married soon, or at least, that's what I thought. For months I had been expecting a knock on the door, an envelope in the mail, or even a simple phone call inviting me to the happiest day of her life. I kept my phone close at all times, checking it every few minutes, convincing myself that maybe she was waiting for the perfect moment to surprise me with the invitation. After all, wasn't I the one who bandaged her knees after every fall? The one who stayed awake with her during thunderstorm nights, when she was too scared to sleep alone? The one who had sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and even meals at times, just to give her the best education. Surely she wouldn't shut me out of something so monumental. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks slipped by like sand between my fingers, no message came. No envelope, no knock at the door. My hope began to wither, but denial is a cruel companion. I told myself maybe she was stressed. Maybe her future in-laws were handling the arrangements. Maybe I would get the invitation at the last minute. It wasn't until one evening, while scrolling aimlessly through Facebook, that my heart finally shattered. There it was, photos of Emma in a white gown, standing beside her groom, a man I had only met once in passing. She was glowing, radiant, and smiling in a way that made my chest ache. The caption read, "The most magical day of our lives." And there I sat, alone in my modest kitchen, staring at a celebration I was never invited to. Tears blurred my vision as I scrolled through image after image. The aisle decorated with lilies, my favorite flower, the one Emma always associated with me. The dance with the groom's mother, a moment I had always dreamed of sharing with my daughter. Even a toast where someone wrote, "To the family that raised her and stood by her side, family," yet I was nowhere to be seen. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to calm the storm inside me, but the pain was unbearable. It wasn't just about missing the wedding. It was about the cruel, deliberate choice my daughter had made. She had erased me from her happiest memory, as if I were nothing more than a shadow she was ashamed of. Later, through whispers from distant relatives, I learned the truth. Her new in-laws had convinced her that I didn't fit in, that I was too plain, too unrefined, too much of a reminder of her humble beginnings, and Emma, my Emma, had agreed. I remember standing in front of the mirror that night, staring at my reflection. My eyes were red, my face pale, and yet all I could see was the years of love I had poured into her. How could that not count for something? How could the bond between a mother and daughter be erased so easily? For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. But as I sat there, in the silence of my empty house, I whispered to myself, "If she can choose to forget me, I will choose to remember this pain." And in that moment, though I didn't yet know how, the seed of my revenge was planted. It had been only a week since I discovered Emma's wedding through photographs. My wound was still raw, like a cut that refused to close. I moved through my days mechanically watering the garden, folding laundry, sipping lukewarm tea. Yet every corner of my home reminded me of her. The house still echoed with her laughter from years ago, when she would dance barefoot across the living room floor, or sneak spoonfuls of cookie dough from the kitchen. I thought silence would be my new companion, but one afternoon, my phone lit up with her name, Emma. For a moment, my heart leapt, foolishly hoping she might finally say the words I had been longing to hear. "I'm sorry, Mom. I made a mistake. I should have had you there with me." I answered quickly, voice trembling, "Hello." Her tone was casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" How was I? I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she thought I was, knowing I had watched her wedding through a stranger's camera lens. But instead, I swallowed my pain, keeping my voice steady. "I'm fine," I said. "How was the wedding?" There was a pause, brief but telling. She didn't apologize, she didn't explain. She simply brushed past it as if it were a minor inconvenience to be ignored. "Oh, it was wonderful," she said lightly. "Anyway, listen. I wanted to ask you for a favor." My grip on the phone tightened. "A favor?" I was wondering. She continued, "If David and I could use the beach house for our honeymoon. You know, the one by Clearwater. It's so private and romantic, and it would mean so much to us." For a second, I couldn't breathe, the audacity of it. She had erased me from her wedding, chosen her in-laws over me. Yet now she wanted to step into the home that represented everything I had worked for. That beach house wasn't just property. It was the place where her father and I had spent summers before he passed away, where Emma had learned to swim, where she had collected seashells as a child and begged us to build sandcastles until the sun went down. And now she wanted to claim it as hers, as if I were nothing more than a keyholder to her convenience. I forced a smile into my voice. "Oh, the beach house," I murmured. "You and David want to use it." "Yes," she replied, her voice brimming with entitlement. "We'll only be there for a week. We'll take care of it, I promise. It'll be perfect for us." I let silence linger for a moment, long enough for her to grow slightly uneasy. My mind was racing, not with whether I would say yes or no, but with how I would respond. For every image of her wedding that haunted me, for every sting of humiliation I felt, I knew I could not simply refuse her. That would be too easy for her to dismiss, too easy for her to call me bitter. No, this called for something else. "Something sweeter, of course, Emma," I finally said, voice calm, even warm. "You're welcome to use the house." I could almost hear her relief as she exhaled. "Oh, thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand. You're the best. The best." The words stung because just days ago I wasn't even good enough to witness her vows. But I bit down on my bitterness and smiled into the emptiness of my living room. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long while, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant crash of waves echoing in my memory. She thought she had won. She thought I was the same mother who would always give, always forgive, always bend until I broke. But this time I would not break. I looked at a framed photo on the wall, Emma at age 7, holding a seashell bigger than her hand, grinning from ear to ear. Next to her was her father, his arm wrapped around her. He was gone now, but his words came back to me. "One day she'll have to learn, darling, and when she does, make sure the lesson is one she'll never forget." And so the plan began to take shape. Emma would have her honeymoon at the beach house, but it would not be the dream she imagined. It would be the lesson she had earned. The night before Emma and David were due to arrive at the beach house, I drove down myself. The salty breeze brushed against my face as I unlocked the old wooden door, the hinges creaking with familiarity. This place had always been my sanctuary, a place full of memories of my late husband and my daughter's childhood. To them it was just a vacation home. To me it was sacred. As I stepped inside, the house smelled faintly of the ocean and cedarwood. Sunlight streamed in through the large glass windows, dancing across the living room floor. My heart tightened. I thought of all the summers Emma had spent here, begging me to let her stay in the ocean until her fingers pruned, proudly showing me her treasure chests of seashells. And now the very child who had once begged me to build sandcastles beside her had decided I wasn't worthy to watch her walk down the aisle. I ran my hand along the banister of the staircase, steadying myself. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about teaching her that love is not something to use and discard. So I set to work. The first thing I did was remove the bottle of chilled champagne I kept for special occasions from the fridge. Instead, I replaced it with a half-empty jug of flat orange juice. The stocked pantry, usually filled with crackers, wine, and seafood pasta, was cleared out. I left behind only a loaf of stale bread and a jar of pickles. Next, I called the internet provider and reported a service issue, ensuring the Wi-Fi would be disconnected for at least a week. No movies, no scrolling through their perfect little lives on social media, just silence and each other's company. But my most careful act of preparation came in the form of photographs. I gathered frames from across the house, pictures of Emma as a child, always with me or her father. One of her sitting on his shoulders at the beach, one of me teaching her to ride a bicycle on the boardwalk, one of her asleep in my arms after a long day in the sun. I placed them in every corner of the house, on bedside tables, in the bathroom, on the dining room sideboard. Wherever she turned, she would be reminded of the very love she had so easily cast aside. Finally, on the dining table, I left a sealed envelope. My handwriting curled across the front. For Emma, I didn't fill it yet. That would come later. For now, I wanted her to sit with the discomfort of the memories first. When the preparations were complete, I took one last look at the house. It was beautiful, peaceful, and painfully mine. I whispered to the empty rooms, "Teach her what I cannot say aloud." The next afternoon, Emma and David arrived. I watched from the dunes, far enough to remain unseen, yet close enough to catch glimpses of their excitement. They unlocked the door, hand in hand, laughter trailing behind them like ribbons. For a brief moment, I almost faltered. She was still my daughter, after all, but then I remembered the photos of her wedding, the empty space in my heart where my seat should have been. And the hesitation vanished. As the evening sun began to dip into the horizon, their laughter grew faint, replaced by voices edged with irritation. Through the open windows, I could hear snippets. "Where's the champagne? The Wi-Fi isn't working. Pickles, is this some kind of joke?" I smiled softly to myself, the breeze carrying their frustration to me like music. My plan was working, not out of cruelty, but as a mirror to show her what she had done. She had taken comfort, security, and love for granted, and now she was left with nothing but emptiness. By the third day, I knew the photographs had begun to work their quiet magic. When I slipped into the house during their afternoon beach walk to drop off the final letter, I saw the frames slightly turned, as though Emma had tried to avoid looking at them. I imagined the unease gnawing at her, memories resurfacing she couldn't escape. That night, as the tide whispered against the shore, I walked away from the house, leaving them in the middle of their unraveling honeymoon. I had given her the lesson. All that remained was the truth, wrapped in that letter waiting on the dining table. The waves outside the beach house rolled endlessly, their rhythm steady, like a heartbeat that had existed long before us and would continue long after. It was the final night of Emma and David's so-called honeymoon. By then, their laughter had been replaced with silence, their patience worn thin by the inconveniences I had so carefully arranged. But more than the missing luxuries, it was the presence of memory that had haunted them. Every room they entered, my face and her father's face looked back at them through photographs. Every glance reminded Emma of the home she had come from, of the hands that had raised her, of the love she had tossed aside when it no longer suited her. That night, Emma found the letter. It sat quietly on the dining table, sealed in its envelope, waiting like a final guest at a banquet no one had invited. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the familiar curve of my handwriting. For a moment she hesitated, as though part of her already knew the weight of what was inside. She opened it. The letter was short, but every word was carved from the truth of my heart. "Emma, a wedding without your mother is a choice you made. A honeymoon in her house is not a right you deserve. This home was built on love, sacrifice, and family. You treated me as though I were none of those things. Family is not something to use when convenient. It is something to cherish every day, especially when the world convinces you otherwise. May this week remind you of what you turned your back on. The door will always be here, but it will not open so easily again. Mom. When I slipped away from the dunes that night, I didn't wait to see her reaction. I didn't need to. The truth has its own way of sinking in, like the tide pulling at the shore until it reshapes it completely. As I walked along the moonlit sand, my heart was surprisingly light. Revenge had not been about punishment, it had been about balance. For once, Emma had felt what I had felt. To be forgotten, to be taken for granted, to sit in the cold shadow of neglect. Did she cry when she read my words? Did she regret? I may never know, and perhaps I didn't need to. Because as I listened to the ocean's roar, I realized the letter wasn't just for her. It was for me too. It was my way of saying goodbye to the version of myself who had always bent, always given, always hoped. It was my way of stepping into a woman who could stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. The waves washed over my feet, cool and steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Emma had made her choices, and I had made mine, and this time mine was final.